The coldest game in NFL history. Players got frostbite, 4 fans suffered heart attacks at the stadium, 1 even died from exposure. But this isn't just a story about a cold game. It was ranked as the 3rd greatest game in NFL history, and for good reason. From the late game heroics of Bart Starr to the impact it would have on further popularizing the sport, this is the Ice Bowl. By the way, if you're new here, welcome. This is NFL Unveiled, and if you like old school football, you're in the right place, because that's all we talk about. The AFL and NFL had recently agreed to a merger, although it wasn't going to be finalized until 1970. So until then, the AFL and NFL would have a championship game, and the winner of each would advance to the Super Bowl. It was 1967, and Dallas headed to Green Bay to face the 2-time defending champions. The Packers now had an aging and injured roster, and were not the same team that had dominated for much of the 60s. The Cowboys had lost 34-27 against the Packers in the title game the previous season. It was a close game in which Dallas could have tied, but an interception in the end zone with just 28 seconds left ended any hopes of an upset. Revenge is a dish best served cold though, right? Despite Dallas's menacing doomsday defense and the speed they had on offense, Green Bay were 6.5 point favorites, and that might have been because of the weather, with players from Dallas not necessarily used to the frigid temperatures in Green Bay. Just a few days before kickoff, there was a discussion as to whether the game should be delayed to Monday, but Monday was supposed to be even colder. The weather leading up to the game had been pleasant, relatively speaking, plenty of sunshine, and it was even enough to quote, work up a sweat. But the weather forecast was slightly off. The players were in for a surprise, as it ended up being the coldest game in NFL history, at a brisk minus 13 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill around minus 48. It could have been slightly more bearable, but the underground heating system broke at Lambeau Field, which left the ground frozen by game time, described by one player to be like falling on jagged concrete. It was more like a skating rink than a football field, and some Dallas players speculated coach Vince Lombardi did it intentionally. I don't know about that, but
our field is going to be in good shape because unless something happens to that electric blanket we have out there, I'm thinking sometime maybe I ought to go out and pull a switch.
Improvisation was required. Packers offensive lineman Fuzzy Thurston decided to throw back 10 shots of vodka to warm up. 7 members of the marching band set to perform developed hypothermia. Despite the brutal conditions and the stadium being empty 10 minutes before kickoff, 50,861 fans would quickly fill those seats. So we get to the game and the refs blow the whistle. A slight problem. It froze to his lips. He then pulled the whistle loose, but the skin ripped off, so it started to bleed. From that point on, the refs used their voices to officiate. The Packers would get off to a strong start. The first drive of the game, they marched 82 yards in 16 plays. In the second quarter, 3rd and 1 on Dallas's 43, Bart Starr lofted a pass to Boyd Dowler, who came down with it for a 46-yard touchdown. The Packers defense also noticed a tell of star receiver Bob Hayes. When it was a run play, he came to the line of scrimmage with his hands in his pants. Pause. When it was a pass, his hands were out. That being said, the cold definitely got to the Florida native, as he was pretty ineffective for the game. He finished with just 3 receptions for 16 yards. But momentum is real, and Dallas was getting accustomed to the cold. Even though they did not gain a single first down in the second quarter, they would return a Bart Starr fumble for a touchdown. Then Packer safety Willie Wood fumbled a punt, and Dallas got a field goal out of it, sending the Packers into the locker room up only 14-10. Players were struggling to get their footing throughout the game. The ball was, quote, like throwing a frozen pumpkin, and there were plenty of drop balls. But this all added to the lore that would eventually surround the game. Dallas came out of the locker room making some adjustments. They would take a 17-14 lead on a 50-yard halfback option by Dan Reeves, who was a quarterback in college, to receiver Lance Rentzel, 17 unanswered points. In the third quarter, Green Bay had 3 possessions, which went for -1, +13, and -2 yards. Despite both teams coming up empty in the third, it was going to be a game that was decided by very few points. So up 3, the Cowboys felt like they had control. Then the Packers went for -5 yards and +2 yards on their first 2 drives in the fourth. Bart Starr had been sacked 8 times, a Packers record high. This wasn't all on the O-line. The receivers couldn't keep their footing on the ice when cutting, so he ended up holding the ball for too long on many plays. But this would make Dallas even more confident. Cue the magic of Bart Starr. With 4 minutes and 50 seconds left in the fourth, the Packers had the ball at their own 32. So again, up to this point, in the second half, they've had 10 possessions for -9 yards, and a missed field goal. In Chuck Mercine's own words, we hadn't done a damn thing in the whole second half, but that's what we were built for, the last 2 minutes of a game.
We were ready in that last drive. We were totally focused on what we needed to do in order to go down and win this ball game. I don't want that to sound trite. But we did, and when I looked into those faces, all I did was then just call a play.
The Packers marched down the field, and Starr went for a perfect 5 for 5 on his passes. The most significant came after running back Donnie Anderson was tackled for a 9-yard loss. It was now 2nd and 19. Bart Starr would connect with Anderson for a 9-yard gain and then a 12-yard gain to get the first down. Then, a few plays later, Starr made what he said was the best call of his career. It involved some misdirection, as the Packers faked pulling a guard, which also drew defensive tackle Bob Lilly, and that opened up a lane for an 8-yard rush up the middle to the 3-yard line with 54 seconds remaining. The following play, Anderson scored, according to him, and some others there, but the refs ruled him about a foot short of the goal line. It could have cost them the game, because on the next play, on 1st and goal, Anderson was stuffed, and then he slipped on 2nd and goal and came short of the end zone. Bart Starr called a timeout with 16 seconds left. It was now 3rd and goal, less than a yard. Everyone was expecting a pass, given the Packers had no timeouts remaining, and down 3, if it was incomplete, it would give them an opportunity to tie or go for the win. But as Starr discussed with Lombardi on the sideline, there was doubt about whether the Packers could keep their footing. He would say, "Coach, the linemen can get their footing for the wedge, but the backs are slipping. I'm right there. I can just shuffle my feet and lunge in." Lombardi, like everybody else, didn't fancy hanging around any longer than he needed to. Run it and let's get the hell out of here. So Starr took it himself, but he didn't tell his teammates, so Chuck Mercine thought he was getting the ball. And Mercine had been critical on this drive, gaining 34 of the 68 yards. Even more impressive is that he was playing for the Giants just 5 weeks prior. As Jerry Kramer and Ken Bowman double-team Jethro Pugh, Starr lunged into the end zone and the game was over. Some claim Kramer was a step early on the play, but regardless, Green Bay would go on to win the Super Bowl and finish the unofficial three-peat, after which Lombardi retired. The win epitomized the Lombardi-era Packers. Despite struggling for much of the second half, when they needed to make the plays, they did. The game itself, with the tough conditions and dramatic ending, was perfect for NFL films, who mythologize the event. In Steve Sabol's own words, "I think it's the greatest football game of all time. The game conditions, the back and forth, the competitiveness, the high level of play, the dramatic ending, a 3rd straight championship, and that final drive. It was something to witness."